All right, everyone, good morning. We have reached Thursday, and the three of us are back to chat about Celtic and potentially Kieran Tierney for a fair part of this show today, guys, because that's the big story that's got everyone talking. But we've got a game to look forward to just in a couple of days now. We've got some more transfer stuff, some Alistair Johnston comments, and we might mention Sunday's Cup final victory as well if things go well. How are things, guys? Are you okay?
Yeah, sorry, Ryan.
I was waiting for you, Tony. You were off yesterday. I was on.
You never work that out. You need to communicate. We need just one of you always is the one that goes. Like Carter Vickers
You and I
goes.
don't talk apart from this. This is only half an hour in the day that we actually speak to each other. The rest is just silence. I'm kidding on.
I'm good, if that's the question that was asked. I'm very good, so thank you for asking. Cheers. Good to be back. Always is.
Ryan?
Yeah, happy to be back on. Happy to discuss Celtic. Happy to talk about these Kieran Tierney links, because I feel as if, you know, it's been spoken about for the past couple of years, a potential return for Kieran Tierney. You talk about his injuries, you talk about his lack of game time under Mikel Arteta. I know he played last night. I actually watched him last night against Crystal Palace. By all accounts, I thought it was pretty good for the 69, 70 minutes he was on the park before it looked as if he came off with an injury, but he then signalled over to the bench that it was just fatigue. It was his first Arsenal game in something like 19 months. I know he'd played for Sociedad in between, but yeah, it was good to see him back out on the pitch, back out playing at the Emirates, and he was still showing how good a player he still is. We've seen that for Scotland, but it's all about injuries with Kieran Tierney. But he looked good last night for the 70 minutes that he did play. And I'm sure this podcast is going to be dominated by his name this morning, just due to the links that were coming out over the past sort of what, 17, 18 hours or so.
Yeah, there's a strange irony in the whole Kieran Tierney thing, in that we only found out yesterday that Arsenal weren't going to exercise their right to sign him up to a new deal, or certainly the year's extension. So on the day we find out that Arsenal don't want to keep him necessarily, he then plays for Arsenal for the first time in 19 months, and the first time for anyone since Scotland at the Euros against Switzerland. So it's been a lengthy layoff, but it sounds like he did okay. It was cramp that he had, and the reason he went off, I saw some people saying it was an injury. I think maybe the Arsenal account officially said it was an injury initially, but Mikel Arteta confirmed that it was just cramp. But yeah, everyone's talking about Kieran Tierney, Tony.
Yeah, and listen, I think everybody wants to see the return of Kieran Tierney. If Celtic can get Kieran Tierney fit and up and running, you've got a wonderful footballer on your hands. He's only 27, and I'd rather he come back now than come back in his 30s when he's even more injury prone, if you want to label him as injury prone. I think he's had bad luck and horrendous luck with injuries. And if someone can get a tune out of him and get him fit, you have to think that it's Brendan Rodgers, and he clearly maybe wants to do that. And also, I think just getting away from the London scene, and Billy Connolly had a famous song about it, stay a while with your own folk. I think Kieran Tierney needs to be with his own folk. And I think as well that mindset coming back to Celtic, because he's adored at Celtic. The Celtic supporters love him. He's lauded from the rooftops. And I just think that protective Celtic family arm around him, I think that would work wonders for him in terms of in the head as well, in that headspace. And I think at 27, if you could get him back and he could be fit, then I think you'd have a wonderful footballer. And I think Rodgers thinks the same. And I'm the hopeless and eternal romantic about Celtic, and getting the band back together type stuff with Kieran Tierney. But I want him for his footballing ability, because I think he's a smashing footballer when everything, we get a level playing field, and come back up the road, prove your fitness, and just recapture what you had before you left for Arsenal. And I think it would do everybody, both parties, the world of good.
It's interesting getting the consensus from you wonderful viewers and commenters, because there's a wide range of opinions. Some people are in favour of it. Mark saying, I fit Kieran Tierney is one of the first names on our team sheet. Fact. Some people maybe not quite as into it, like T1 saying it's a pure gamble, and some other people saying that it's not that they would do. And clearly that comes down to his injury issues. So I think that the bottom line here is, in the chat, is a couple of Scottish outlets last night reporting this, that Brendan Rodgers does want to bring him back to the club, and you wouldn't be massively surprised at that, given that the two of them worked previously. Obviously they were pictured fairly recently, weren't they, as well, which kind of got the speculation going as well. But that is the chat from a few of the outlets up here, saying that Celtic are keen to bring him to the club, and Tierney apparently said to be open to the idea of a big pay cut as well. And it would be a big pay cut because I think he's on about £120,000 a week at Arsenal at the moment. So there are certain potential stumbling blocks with this deal, Ryan, but I think it's one that's going to go on, and there's certainly a bit of uncertainty about the left back position with Greg Taylor and Alex Vai. At the moment, neither of them are going to be with us next season as we stand right now, or sit.
Yeah, that is true, and also the fact that it looks as if Bernabe is on the move, or he's going to stay put in Brazil. I seen a report yesterday saying that Internacional and Celtic are negotiating over a fee, and it's thought to be bigger than the fee that Celtic paid for the player. Oh. So somehow Celtic are going to be making a profit on Alexandro Bernabe. And bearing in mind, I've watched this guy in person quite a few times. If they're going to be making a profit on him, then I think they've done a pretty good job. And if they were to replace Bernabe, Taylor, and potentially Bailly, if he doesn't come back next season, with Kieran Tierney, a fit and firing Kieran Tierney is the best left back in Scotland by some distance. When he was at his best at Arsenal, he was one of the best left backs in Britain. He was so good for Arsenal when he was fit and firing under Emery, and then on to Arteta. It seems as if Arteta likes playing with the inverted fullbacks just that little bit more. So he plays with Zinchenko. Sometimes he plays Kivior out there, but he was playing Tierney last night. That was an interesting one to see him back in the team. And it just goes to show you, I remember watching him during like the lockdown football, and Kieran Tierney was one of the first names on the team sheet for Arsenal. It's been unfortunate for him, whether that's down to form, the manager picking different players, or the injuries that he's picked up, and he has picked up quite a few injuries. But he did have a fruitful spell out in Spain last season. I'm going to be looking into that in a little bit more detail for an article that's coming out in the Celtic Way this afternoon, talking about Tierney and the current situation that they find themselves in. For me personally, if Celtic can get both Tierney and Bailly in the same, as that left back option, Bailly and Tierney can split the load between them and play 50-50. I think if you're bringing in Kieran Tierney, you've got to be mindful of the fact that he is going to miss games due to having injuries. He might not be able to play 2 games a week. You'll need to prioritise, kind of like how you prioritise with Carter Vickers in some games. But if you've got an able deputy and someone like Alex Bailly, and I know that there'd need to be quite a bit of a fee paid to Barcelona to get him permanently, but if you could get that dynamic, I can't think of anyone better for Bailly to learn off of than Kieran Tierney, because I see a lot of similarities between the two players. That would be my ideal link up if it was Kieran Tierney and then Alex Bailly as well, and you could interchange them without having too much of a quality drop. It wouldn't be like a stark drop. I'm not saying that Alex Bailly's on the same level as Tierney, but I think that he can get to that level in the next few years. That would be my hope for the left back position going forward, but easier said than done, especially negotiating with Barcelona, who will be quite keen on keeping their player.
Wazzaboy, just a Greg Taylor, Wazzaboy asking you saying that Greg Taylor will leave, Ryan. It does seem potentially like things are heading that way. I mean, Greg Taylor can speak to clubs himself in a matter of weeks, and you feel like something maybe would have been sorted by now. Never say never, but it seems like things are heading that way. What about Tierney then, Tony? The injury stuff is clearly the big issue here. With all due respect to ourselves, and we all love Celtic, if Kieran Tierney was fully fit all the time, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation about us re-signing him. But where'd you come down on it? Because obviously signing a player who's going to spend a fair amount of time injured isn't a good thing, and history would tell you that probably would be the case with Tierney, because he's missed a hell of a lot of games. But if you're getting him potentially for free in the summer or maybe a nominal fee in January if you want to get him in early. Is it the case that this might be just too good an opportunity to turn down?
I can down on it in the fact that if the manager wants him, I'm quite happy to go with that. Because the manager knows his background, everything about him. And if the manager sanctions this, then he clearly sees Kieran Tierney playing some pivotal and vital role moving forward and playing football matches for Celtic. And there is the bonus that you could get him on a free. I think that's just the no-brainer of it all. And it is possibly too good an opportunity to turn down. But they've clearly had a discussion about it, because they've met up recently. And don't tell me that those pictures for the press where they're happy and laughing and joking that they haven't spoken about the return of KT. I mean, it is the green and white elephant in the room, isn't it? Let's be honest, whenever you talk about Kieran Tierney and Brendan Rodgers. So he clearly wants him. And I don't know, at this moment in time, you've got to go with his judgment on it, haven't you? He's clearly asked him about, and probably asked about, his fitness in the regime that he's doing at the minute to continually prove that. Again, he'll not be on anything like the 120 grand that he's purported to be on at Arsenal. You know, so people in the chat saying it would be a pay-as-you-play deal. I don't think Celtic would enter into something like that with Kieran Tierney, and I don't think the player would take that gamble either. But I think it's exciting if you can get like Kieran Tierney back. And as Ryan said, he would be the best left back in the country if he can prove his fitness. And I think that's the only thing he has to do. He has to prove to the manager that he's fit and he can play football matches. As for Greg Taylor, 13 days Greg Taylor can start talking to other clubs. You would have thought there would have been some movement on this, particularly what Brendan Rodgers alluded to. I think it was September, October. He said he was quite keen on getting it done, and he was hopeful that he would sign a new deal. 13 days, there's nothing being said on it. Seemed to be a bit of an impasse, and maybe it's Greg Taylor that's holding out to see if there's anything out there. Because I know the manager also mentioned he's going to become a father for the first time soon, isn't he? Might want to try England. I mean, it's the player's prerogative in those situations, isn't it? That, you know, that they run down their contract and see if anything is there. If they could get Vi in, as Ryan said, then you would work on that as well, wouldn't you? I think that's like connecting dots, as I always say, isn't it? And joining dots and connecting lines and stuff. So that would be kind of forward planning as well. But yeah, that's. I think that there's an excitement about Kieran Tierney for the fact that you just know a fit Kieran Tierney is a hell of a footballer, and you would rather him, and that hell of a footballer, you'd rather see him in a green and white shirt than anywhere else.
Yeah, Smell the Glove mentioning James Penrice at Hearts, a potential kind of Scottish box ticker backup, which is a lovely turn of phrase. I saw someone else mentioning, is it Mackenzie at Aberdeen? So there's a few good players going around. What is the ideal scenario then if because you've kind of got a bit of a blank canvas potentially at left back? Because as I say, as we stand right now, we don't have a left back for next season tied up. You know, it's certainly a first team one. So what would the ideal scenario? Would it be Kieran Tierney and then someone like Alex Valle, and maybe you can manage Kieran Tierney a bit better than we did the first time around when he played virtually all the time. The issue I'm having is that he just is picking up a lot of injuries. I mean, the most recent one, I think he missed 37 matches. With that was from the Euros, and I've got a list of his injuries here. And since he left us, and only in 2019, he's got, I think, 11 significant injuries here that he's picked up, and it's terrible luck for Kieran Tierney. But it's a bit of a kind of fact now going forward.
Yeah, and I think Celtic are partly to blame for those injuries because he was playing through the pain barrier in these last sort of 2 seasons with the club before he was sold to Arsenal that summer in 2019. I don't think you can rely on Tierney being 100% fit all of the time. Look at the injury record. That's what that will tell you. That's why somebody like Baye would be so handy. And you could sell that to Baye as saying you still will get about 30, 35 games a season, whether you're coming off the bench in some games. If Tierney can only play 60 minutes, then that's fine, because I think in that 60 minutes Celtic will blow away quite a few teams with how good Tierney can be on that left back position, because he can overlap and he can be an offensive weapon as well as a defensive monster for Celtic. Having someone like Bailly to come in who wouldn't just learn from Kieran Tierney, but he would also play in a lot of the minutes that Tierney didn't need to play in would be absolutely brilliant. I think it'd be a great dynamic between those two players, because you've got the potential of Bailly to sell him on in a few years if you were to get him permanently, but you've also got somebody like Tierney that he can learn off of, and someone who can play the big games. Celtic will need two left backs in the summer, because I think Greg Taylor will go. Alex Bailly, if he is to go back to Barcelona and he wouldn't come back to Celtic, then they need another left back. So it is right. It is a sort of blessing in a way, because they've got a blank canvas to go with that left back position and really make it and really stamp their authority, or someone else stamp their authority on that in that area, with Bernabei going as well, you would assume, or staying in Brazil, staying put where he is. For me, if Tierney can prove his fitness, that he can play at least half of the games in a season, then you bring in some of the younger that can play in those games, and you can prioritise, then I think it'd be quite a good move having those two players to interchange. If you can manage Kieran Tierney and get the best games out of him, then I don't think anybody would complain. And Bailly has already shown enough to, in my opinion, to warrant staying here longer than the year's loan that he's currently on.
Okay, Steve-O, can't we just buy a new left back that's good and fit? What am I missing here? Well, it may be that comes alongside Kieran Tierney. Who knows? As I say, it might just be that Kieran Tierney makes it's kind of too good an opportunity to turn down, especially when he's got that prior relationship with the manager. Blake saying, makes sense if Welsh is due to leave, need to replace him with a Scottish player. There was chat yesterday that Stephen Welsh, I think, is wanting to move out and get some more regular football in January. I think the other two players mentioned were Palma and Naropski. Tony?
Yeah, I mean, my caveat with Tierney is I'd want him to play full games. I'd want him to play 90 minutes. I'm not he would have to really prove that he can last. I wouldn't want him for 60 minutes and stuff like that. I would want him to play full matches. And that's kind of the stumbling block here, really, isn't it? This guy has to prove that he's fully fit and he can last the course and distance in matches. And I know Ryan talking about Vi or and other, is a couple of players that you mentioned, Hamish, from other clubs as well, Penrice and player at Aberdeen, whose name escapes me. He just told me about 5 minutes ago, but
Mackenzie, aye.
I was going to say Mackenzie, well, too sure. So if that's the case, so be it. But as a risk and it's a gamble, and again, there's a lot of sentiment in this, and it's, you don't run your club on sentiment. But again, if the manager wants him back, then he's going to have to answer. Kieran Tierney's going to have to answer so many questions, because as I say, I want him to play matches, big matches, important matches. And I don't want him to play for an hour. I want him to play for 90 minutes, and that would be my big caveat with Kieran Tierney. How many games can you actually play? Not half games or hourly games. How many games can you play? And I would base it off that. The manager clearly loves him. He's worked with him before. He's had that relationship, and that's why it keeps coming up when we get to kind of, and I know he's had a lot of injuries, and it is a huge kind of, factor that you have to bring in and look at and acknowledge. You mentioned 11 injuries. That's a hell of a lot, isn't it? So you have to. These are things you're going to have to talk about it for any kind of Kieran Tierney deal to come to fruition. Alex Vi, you just don't know his mindset, do you? Does he want a crack at Barcelona? But I'm sure Celtic are all over the likes of others, left backs, if they have to bring them in, because it has all gone quiet with Greg Taylor. And as I say, in 13 days, Greg Taylor can talk to whoever he wants. And that clock's ticking on that, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of real movement towards that coming to any kind of conclusion.
I think the point you made right at the top is the big one for me. Like all the stuff we're talking about here, Brendan Rodgers is and the medical team at Celtic who will know Tierney better than most. Maybe not the Arsenal medical team, but apart from them, they'll know him better. they'll be weighing all this up. It's a very obvious thing for us to say, but everything we're discussing here, they'll be weighing it up. And if the move isn't right, it won't happen. Brendan Rodgers clearly feels, it's doing. We'll be chatting to Kieran Tierney as well. So let's leave it there for now, guys. I'm sure we'll revisit that topic as we move forward. There is another transfer player I want to talk about. Before that, Alistair Johnston speaking, I think after the game on Sunday, about going through the pain barrier to play on Sunday, says that, and this is last Sunday, he says that if it had been a normal game, he probably wouldn't have played. And apparently he took a pretty kind of nasty slip in the first 10 minutes that I feel like I vaguely remember, but can't quite put my finger on it. And he was saying it was going to be a long afternoon after that, Ryan. He wasn't great on Sunday, but I think you forgive him it for just putting his body in the line, and we love him for it.
You wouldn't expect anything less from Alistair Johnston, to be honest. He's just got that gritty mentality that I think everybody loves to see him, and especially in games like that where you need him, even just having his name in that team sheet, even if he wasn't 100% fit. I think that's a big thing, just mentally as well, seeing him in the team sheet. You know that he's going to put in 100% every single time, regardless if he was 100% or not, which he clearly wasn't, because he wasn't getting down the line as much. He wasn't as mobile as what you're used to seeing him. But I still think he wasn't dreadful in the game. He just wasn't his usual, marauding self, as I read somewhere the other day, and I completely agree with that statement. Still, he still managed to get 60, 70 minutes before Tony Ralston came onto the pitch, and I liked that he was giving Ralston big praise when he came on, because I thought Ralston was pretty good when he came on as well. I thought he kept the game, he held the game together, brought that extra bit of oomph that was required that seems Tony Ralston can only give to a game. He's going to give that passion as well. The right back position's a really passionate position for Celtic at the moment, because you get Alistair Johnston starting games, and you've got Tony Ralston, who is a self-confessed Celtic fan, and bit of a passion merchant at that right back position, coming on to then supplement that that energy that Johnston brings. So yeah, I just hope that he's okay for Tannadice. Hopefully these next few days.
I think Ralston might start. Just
be,
based on what he was saying.
Playing against his former team, because Ralston had a loan spell out at Dundee United a few years back now. I think regardless, I think you'd trust whoever plays in that right back position. But what I like about Alistair Johnston, he doesn't hold back with anything that he says in a press conference. He really is his own person. And there was a great comment in particular in that article that was put out on the website. And he was saying, right, it's time to bring Tony on after a bit. It's time to bring Tony Ralston on because I'm feeling it. I can't play anymore. I just love that brutal honesty from Alistair Johnston. I actually think he's got even more honest in the past few months in some of his press conferences. Slagging Trusty, slagging old man Carter Vickers. I love that from him. I think he's got a great attitude, and he's clearly a popular member of the dressing room. So if he isn't fine for Sunday, then you trust Ralston to come in and do a decent job. But in an ideal world, you'd want him to be starting every game.
I'd be happy for Johnston to miss Sunday, to be honest, and put Ralston in there, and I think we'd be all right there, and then just take it from there.
A big pass for the third goal as well. Yeah, somebody in the comments. It was a great cutting pass.
I think you freshen things up for Sunday, don't you? They've came through a real kind of, a leggy affair against Rangers. So I wouldn't be averse to seeing the likes of Ralston and McCowan play on Sunday. Ida as well. That kind of thing. I think you have to. These are the games where you need to rotate. And it's all right saying, you can't tinker too much, but you're still putting out a team that's capable of winning a football match. You know what I mean? And you trust this.
It's a tough game, though, isn't it? It's Dundee United away stuff.
It's not a gimme by any stretch, but I think you need to get some energy levels back into the team, because that was energy sapping on Sunday. Both physically and mentally. So you need to make the right changes, and I think the three that we've mentioned there, I wouldn't want to take any risk with Johnston. Sometimes I've said before, you need to protect players from themselves. So I would play Ralston, no problem with that. I don't have a problem bringing in McCowan, because McCowan, ex-Dundee, he's run Dundee United ragged. He'll be right up for that as well. And then bring in Adam Ida. I'm a horses for courses man. They might go a bit physical against you. like Big Ida for that kind of element as well, but he's got no shortage of technique on the floor as well and skill. So I think those three would be uppermost in my mind in terms of picking a, spoiler alert for your predicted 11, if that's the case. But, I think that's pretty sensible, isn't it? As you say, Hamish, it's an important game. You just want to keep that winning momentum going and make enough changes just to freshen it up, but mindful of the fact that 3 points is a must.
Yeah, I mean, the other argument is that they've had the kind of rare occurrence of a full week off and a couple of days off as well. I'm looking ahead. So we have Motherwell at home on, Boxing Day. So I don't know if he might. I'm trying to work out St Johnstone after that and then the derby. So he probably, I'm convinced the manager has his team ready for a number of games ahead. I think he'll know roughly what his team is for Ibrox already. I think we could probably tell him the team for Ibrox. It might well be the same team that started the cup final. So I think he might work towards that. But I certainly would make a couple of changes, not too many. Probably the three you mentioned, to be honest. I'd have Ralston starting, assuming that if Alistair Johnston's absolutely fine to go, start him. I'd want Ida in. I think Ida deserves a start. And I thought he was great when he came on in the final, and I think he'd be suited to Tannadice and potentially Luke McCowan as well. I'm not 100% on that because Bernardo would be in there, and yeah, I'm kind of thinking now about Hatate and Engels and thinking maybe McCowan should be in there. So we'll revisit that. Michel Ange Balak-Wisha mentioned again yesterday, guys. He's the Royal Antwerp left winger, 23 years old, was heavily linked with us in the summer, got a pretty bad muscle tear at the start of the season that scuppered any hopes he had of making a summer transfer. Same thing happened to him the previous year as well. 2 years in a row, he's had a muscle tear that scuppered a summer move. But the chat is that we're back in for him. I saw Roma mentioned as well, but he's a left winger, Ryan, and we know that, or we hear that the manager wants to sign a left winger.
Yeah, we've just finished speaking about a left-sided player that's a bit injury prone, and now we speak about another left-sided player that's injury prone. It seems I looked at his injury history, and he has missed quite a few games over the past couple of years with injury. But when he has played for Royal Antwerp, he sort of lit the Belgian league up. Looks a really good young talent, under 21 internationalist for Belgium, one of the highest rated talents in that league. I've watched the individual clips of him. He's quite a tall winger. He's not the smallest. Sometimes you've got small nippy wingers, but he seems a bit taller. I always think that Celtic struggle against taller wingers, it seems. So it'd be great to have one of them in their arsenal. Yeah, I think that's a position that Celtic need to address, because I think Palmer will go in January in search of game time. I think that left side in general will see quite a bit of change in January, whether it be Taylor, Palma, Bernabe, etc. You've got so many players there that whose futures are quite uncertain, or maybe certainly away from Celtic at this moment. So I think there will be changes there. Balak-Wisha, I did want him in the summer. I know that Celtic wanted him too. Apparently Brendan Rodgers personally spoke to the player, and they were quite close to getting a deal concluded. Then there was injuries. That injury scuppered any move that he had. It was also Rennes that were linked with him. Now Rennes have obviously got Jota on out on the wing for them. Who's been a bit hot and cold for Rennes so far this season, being in and out of the team. But I don't think they'll be in for him in January. You said it's Roma that are potentially in for him too. If he's proved his fitness and Celtic want this player, and he's still the same player that he was before his latest setback, then go and get him this January, because I think that the left and right hand side, despite Maeda scoring a lot of goals, I think there's a quality sort of gap between the two. I think you need somebody that's like Kuhn on the left hand side as well. Maeda will come in and out the team. It's absolutely fine. He will give you that oomph game in, game out. But I think there needs to be another option. I was looking at the stats yesterday. Maeda is only a goal away from beating his best ever scoring season for Celtic already, and we're in December. So he's become a really good goals outlet, which is brilliant, because that's what he was brought in for from Japan, remember? Because he scored a lot of goals for Yokohama F. Marinos, but now he's actually getting to that level playing in Scotland. It'd be great to have a second player to sort of switch in and out, because you've got Kuhn, you've got Forrest on that right-hand side. They can interchange between the two of them. It'd be great for Maeda to have that option too, or Celtic to have that option to go between the two players. If he's fit, and he's available and he can still show that level that he was showing for Royal Antwerp, then I'd have no issue with Celtic signing this player because he looks like a really good young talent. But it's all about those injury concerns, and if it's happened in the last 2 seasons, who's to say it won't happen again?
Yeah, it was a thought that crossed my mind, I must say, if that's happened. So we'll wait and see there. We've got Johnny Kenny tonight, Tony, at Stamford Bridge. Final game for Shamrock Rovers. Steve saying he's looking forward to seeing him in action.
I think some Celtic supporters might tune into that. Others might tune into Tottenham Man United. It's
big game.
Absolutely.
That's going to be wild. But you want to take your choice. Yeah, but I wrote a piece about Maida the other day, and of his last 10 goals for Celtic, 2 have been against Rangers, 3 were in the League Cup semi-final against Aberdeen, 3 have been in the Champions League, and a couple in the league. So this is a guy who can score goals. And I spoke to John Hartson about it as well, and he said that people tend to forget he does play the number 9 for Japan.
Yeah.
And has kept Furuhashi out of that, and Matoma at Brighton from playing the number 9 for Hajime Moriyasu's side. So it's not as if he can't do it. He's just been, he's become that figure on the left hand side for Celtic, and he's done it to an incredible level. But he can be, as Ryan said, he can be prolific when he kind of wanders around and he moves, especially when he moves into the centre. So he can play there, and you've no qualms about that. And I was sort of saying about is Maida a club legend or a cult hero? That was the premise of the piece that I wrote. And I think it's in the Herald today. If you wanted to have a look at that and buy a newspaper, you would see that too. But I still think that he needs competition as well. Because there are times when you think that Maida's position in the team is guaranteed. So the likes of Balakwisha breathing down your neck would raise you even more. It would bring on the 2 of you. And again, if Balakwisha can prove his fitness levels, and the manager's clearly kept in contact with him, much the same way Celtic kept in contact with David Turnbull after he did his back in, and then eventually made that transfer happen because he proved he could come back and play. I think the manager has been keeping tabs on both Tierney and Balakwisha to reassure them that if they can prove certain things, then he will sign them, because it's to Celtic's benefit. So I'm all for that. I know Ryan was excited about him in the summer, and he'd probably get excited about him again. And I think if we bring in Quistgarden as well, Ryan would just retire and ride off into the sunset and just say, right, job's done. Yeah, that kind of thing. So he's laughing. But you know what I mean? Yeah, you know my thoughts on these things. See good players, you find systems and you adapt systems around good footballers. And see when you've got that healthy competition in your squad where every player in the 17, 18, 19 is a good footballer, it's no surprise that you're a successful football team, because you're replacing like with like. Sometimes you're adding even more quality with somebody who's coming off rather than somebody that starts. That's just the nature of the way it works. But I think Brendan Rodgers said that himself. He wanted a tight group, but a tight group of quality footballers.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it. And as I say, Kieran Tierney, Balakwisha would have to prove that level of fitness. But you can't tell me that they're not great footballers and would enhance your squad if they can prove that moving forward.
Yeah. I think he wants 2 good players for every position, and you would say we've got it for the vast majority, but left wing for me is one position where we don't have, certainly we don't have reliable players that the manager fully trusts. Maida basically has to play virtually every game at the moment, and having a second option there would be great. And by the way, I found out earlier this week that Japan are playing Australia in Australia later this year in Perth, which is a 4-hour flight from here. But I've got my tickets, guys.
Oh, well done.
The off chance, and I might only get to see Dyson for 20 minutes and Kyogo and Rayo on the bench, but I had to take that chance to see the greatest footballer of all time do his stuff.
Are you going to get a press ticket as well? Surely you must do that. And
no, I'm going as that's not a bad shout. Could
see
try.
If you can get to speak to them. I mean,
yeah. I was going to go as a fan and have a few beers, but
to them on our behalf.
Slight language barrier there, Tony, but maybe we could work on it.
Maeda has
my
been doing quite a
Japanese.
bit of press recently. I think it's down to his good form at the moment, but he always brings his translator. He can say a couple of things in English, but out of the three, or the three Japanese players that are currently at the club, I'd say probably Hatate's English is the best out of the three.
Really?
He has really made strides in learning English, and it's there's really good interviews with him as well. It's still broken English, but for learning a second language, he deserves a bit of credit for that.
I think there's an assassin smile behind Maeda, because I'm sure he understands everything and can speak English.
Yeah.
And there's a comedic value to that, because he just nods in approval and smiles, and I think you understand more than you let on and more than you speak, which is funny.
I just think there's a mystique about Maeda that I love, and I love the players that have that mystique, because the last player, I was actually trying to think back to the last player that had that sort of mystique and that aura about him, not in terms of being like the most amazing football player, but that player that people talk about. Daz Maeda's still a very good player for Celtic, and the numbers show that, and defensively he's brilliant. Last player, I don't know, Paddy McCourt. I'm not saying that they're the same player, because imagine if you had Daz Maeda's work rate and Paddy McCourt's raw ability, you'd probably have the best
player of all time.
I know, but that aura around him, people talk about Maeda very differently. And it's brilliant that he's managed to turn that around, because I remember maybe even this time last year, people were sort of saying, right, Maeda's very hot and cold. Some games he'll play well and some games he won't. Now, all of a sudden, he's a bit of a Celtic hero, a cult hero, people are saying. But I wouldn't even say it's a cult now. I'd say the vast majority are giving him that hero status at Celtic. So he's done really, really well from getting sent off unfairly to where he is just now. It's been an incredible turnaround by the player.
I think he'd be a brilliant poker player when he gives up football. He just gives nothing away and just smiles. You know what I mean? I think he'd be tailor-made for that circuit.
Yeah, love him. Okay, guys, we're going to head off. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support the channel that little bit more and get notified whenever we go live, please consider subscribing. It is completely free. You just have to click or tap subscribe. Depends on what device you're watching us on. Okay, guys, thank you. We'll return this time tomorrow to do it all again.